Good morning, garden friends. Because it is raining outside, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to talk with you guys in regards to 5 things that, as you plan out your garden for 2026, that you take into consideration whether you are a beginner or an avid gardener, because I do believe these things will help save time, keep the enjoyment of having a garden, and understanding that as you plan out your garden, to be intentional. Now, I try to be intentional and not strive for perfection. Okay, I try not to strive for perfection, so let me say that. But I do believe these 5 tips will allow you to be successful when you are planning out your garden. So let's get into this. And I thought, with it being the beginning of the year, what better time to really focus on what you want your garden to provide for you. And by doing so early in the year, it gives you a head start as far as, like I said, being intentional. Now, I've done some things at the end of last year with the hope of success for spring, but it's still about planning things out. Thing that we should consider is the why. Why are we gardening? Is it because we want beautiful spaces? Is it because, we want to encourage pollinators into our garden? Or are we looking to have just a space that after, a hard day at work, that you can just go out and just enjoy the beauty that you create? As beginners, when you ask the why, this will help keep you from being overwhelmed. I think a lot of times when it does come to gardening, and especially beginners, you end up seeing all these, videos out there where, individuals have beautiful gardens, and you want that. But when you ask yourself the why of, planning out your garden, it can help you work with what you have and the amount of time that you are looking to invest in your garden planning. Experienced gardeners, this is where we reset. We are looking at our garden. Do we do things? Do we grow things because we can grow them, or do we grow them because we have an intentional purpose for making those choices? As avid gardeners, we sometimes need to think, what worked in 2025? What felt like in your garden that it was more about joy than the actual work that you had to do to enjoy your garden? Are you scaling back? Are you redefining? I know I tend to redefine, my garden. Are there plants that are my go-to? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Go-to plants, because I have a full sun garden. Yeah, those are things that I end up taking into consideration when I am planning out my garden. 2, know your space, learn it. And that is taking into consideration the amount of sun, the amount of shade, how water travels in your garden. As you guys all know, my garden is on a hill. So we have been strategic in how we have laid out different drainage in our yard to ensure that we are controlling how the water is flowing through our yard to reduce any type of damage or overflow, or mulch beds getting flushed out. And this is the thing: if you end up spending time watching how the sun moves in your yard, whether it is during the height of summer or even in fall and also winter, that will also help you plan out your garden. Because when you end up tracking how the sun hits your yard, you can plan and plant the correct plants. I mean, you wouldn't want to put a plant in a full sun area because you like it, because now you are setting yourself up to not be successful, or your plant to not be successful. For avid gardeners, we take into consideration if we add trees into our garden, how will that end up affecting the amount of sun that is hitting your beds? And I'll give you a good example. In my arbor garden, we planted 2 crabapple profusions because I wanted to be able to provide some filtering for my hydrangeas, because like I said, full sun. Now, while my hydrangeas that I have in the garden can take full sun, when we get extremely hot, I want to be able to add some protection. But also in the back of my mind, the beds that are underneath right now, a lot of those plants like full sun. And there are things that, we end up doing. I believe last year, one of the things that we did, because I saw that my peonies, I saw that my gregaria, and even my winter banana crane 2s needed more sun. So what we ended up doing was we limbed up the trees so that more sun could end up hitting. And those are things that you need to take into consideration, that, if you are planting things that get, big, like trees, how will that in turn impact the garden when they become at full maturity? 3, plan for maintenance. You sit here and you think, what is it? Pinterest is my friend. I love watching other YouTube channels when it comes to gardening. And, think about this. When you see, the photos in Pinterest or other, gardeners, who's actually doing the maintenance? Is it the actual gardener, or, do they have the capability to hire somebody to maintain it for them? But as a beginner, start small. Understand the amount of time, resources that you are able to put into maintaining your garden. Because, that consists of weeding, feeding, deadheading. And if, while being inspired by others, you end up doing things that you cannot maintain, that's where the frustration comes in. So, my recommendation is do you, when it comes to planning out your garden. Beginners, choose plants that are forgiving. And what I mean by that is, a prime example, like I said, my garden is full sun. So I try to focus on plants that can handle the full sun with minimum maintenance. Now, while I choose a lot of drought tolerant plants in the beginning, I have to make sure that they are watered properly and fed until they get established. Because just because a plant says that it is drought tolerant, that is only after it gets established. That I have in my yard that are low maintenance, like my black-eyed Susies, have I think the banana cream daisies are easy, low maintenance once they end up getting established. The gregaria, lavender, just different plants that once they get established, that maintenance of them becomes minimum. And then you can still have a beautiful low maintenance garden. Grouping plants that have similarities. You wouldn't want to group, plants that require a lot of watering with plants that don't, because you could end up overwatering or underwatering plants, and then they will not be successful. So there is, things that when you are choosing plants to take into consideration so that you can be successful. And for us avid gardeners, we have to think about what plants make us have joy, what plants have us looking at gardening as an overwhelming chore. And I think as we experiment with gardening and gain that knowledge, and those failures, we can then end up knowing what works, what brings us joy when it comes to gardening. Fourth, think of the season, not the moment. A great garden is not just about a spring show. It is about year-around experience. I try to plant things that will give me year-around beauty. And this is something that, I sometimes struggle with, because I prefer perennials over annuals. Being able to have that continuous color in the garden is a challenge for me. I am doing more annual seedlings to incorporate into my garden, because when I sit here and I look at the cost savings, a whole lot more cost savings for growing my own seeds as a avid gardener. Somebody that is a beginner, there's nothing wrong with going to the local greenhouses or garden centers to get those annuals to add into your garden. But like I said, this is about doing what works for you. And for beginners, think about beyond spring, utilizing evergreen to add texture, things that will rebloom for you. And a lot of those plants that I had mentioned earlier are low maintenance and can provide you an immense amount of joy. Now, for us avid gardeners, even in my garden, because of wanting to incorporate color, texture, layering, using the combination of, bulbs, perennials, shrubs, whether they are large, shrubs that get larger, or shrubs that, stay nice and compact. We also take into consideration when our garden goes silent. Like right now here in Georgia, a lot of my perennials are in dormancy. Now I have greenery, because I do have some that are evergreen, because I like to be able to see some life during our off season or dormancy for the plants. But the thought process is, do those things to fill in the gaps. And one of the things that I end up doing is I'll plant, violas and pansies and ornamental cabbage, dysanthemums, things that even in our off season, can provide beauty in the garden. And 5, leave room to grow. Everybody has their own style of gardening. I like to be able to see the ground, when I plant things up. But the other thing that I take into consideration is when that plant gets to full maturity, what will the garden end up looking like? And while I know individuals that end up packing, their garden, like I said before, I've never had issues with, powdery mildew, fungus on my plants because I make sure I have good air circulation. And that's one of the things that, as a beginner, to take into consideration is when you are choosing plants, keep in mind that when they get to full maturity, do you have, enough space so that they can breathe, so that they can, remain healthy for you, which in turns goes back to, number 3, the maintenance. And, one of the things of recognizing that as your garden matures, things change. And you, as a gardener, whether beginner or avid, need to be able to change with it. Because I don't know about you guys, my tastes change. What I want my garden to speak to me ends up having me, change the garden around. I do that because I enjoy experimenting. And when you allow the proper spacing, it helps you envision new ideas of how you want your garden to look. I look at gardening as an evolution. While there are staple plants or shrubs in my garden, I believe, like I said, we change. Our tastes change. Our garden changes. If we're adding trees that, what was once a full sun has now become a part sun. So by giving yourself that flexibility in, understanding the space and not just wanting to fill it up, it gives you that flexibility. So a couple things that I would like you to take away from this is, in 2026, your garden doesn't have to be bigger, but be smarter, more aligned, more joyful with your lifestyle. And whether you are planting your first container or redesigning your garden, grow with intention, grow with confidence, grow for you. And if this ended up helping you, let me know in the comment. And then what are you planning on doing differently for 2026? And I would like to share with you guys just some insight. Gardens should support your lifestyle, not compete with it. Match plants to condition, not condition to plants. A garden that fits your lifestyle will outperform one that looks perfect. Gardens are living, breathing spaces. Your garden plans should bend with you, not break you. If you are planning right along with me, please make sure you subscribe, because our goal is to build gardens that grow with us, not against us. Until next time, thanks for visiting Inspiring Garden Corner, and I look for your continued support on my garden journey.